My sister, she was a servant at the wedding. She told me what you could do. I know you can heal me if you are willing.
I am willing. Be cleansed.
Thank you. What can I ever do?
Do not say anything to anyone.
You don't seek your own honor?
Please just do me this one thing. Let them inspect you and see that you are cleansed. Make the proper offering in the temple as Moses commanded, and go on your way.
Oh, that's the Jesus that Christians love to talk about, who they love to worship. The great physician, the world healer, the Jesus of peace, harmony, and love and salvation and sacrifice. But was he? So when you talk to many Christians, they will try and pivot away from the yucky stuff in the Old Testament. You can watch a lot of debate shows and you'll see this. They want to talk about the New Testament. They want to be the red letter Christian, meaning they want to focus on Jesus, how loving and kind and the sacrifice and the salvation that he offered. And you know what? A lot of times, if you watch the debate shows, they will rip them back to the Old Testament and make them talk about it. But I don't, because I know that Jesus was just as savage in the New Testament as he was in the Old Testament. And I'm going to give you 6 times where Jesus was absolutely brutal and savage. And the last 2, I think you're going to find really interesting. Those are his most brutal moments. So stick around for that. Now, the very first one I'm going to talk about is one that I briefly talked about in another video, which I'll link above, which were the 6 passages that helped me lose my faith. So let's get started in Luke. So let's go to Luke. We're going to go to Luke 14:25 through 26. And let me read it real quick. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate the father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciples." Now, apologists will say Jesus doesn't really mean to hate them. Doesn't mean to hate. What he's saying is, in comparison to your love to me and the sacrifice that you're willing to give, you hate them in comparison. But it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. Why wouldn't Jesus just say, you need to love me more? He really says to hate them. And I find that odd with the people, the party of family values, the people who talk about family values. When you read the Old Testament, you won't find Paul or Jesus talking about family values at all. And we'll get to another verse that really backs that up later on in the video. So I don't think they have a leg to stand on as far as family values. Neither Jesus nor Paul thought that you should be married, or even procreate, because the end times were near. So Jesus was very savage with his anti-family values. Okay, for our next one, let's go into Mark. So this is Mark 7:24 through 30. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially Jesus goes to the city of Tyre, and he's trying to stay on the down low. He doesn't really want anyone to know he's there. But a Greek woman found out that he was there, and she found Jesus, and she started begging him to heal her daughter, who she thought was demon possessed. She probably was either mentally ill or had a physical problem with her brain, but this is what they thought. And she comes to Jesus, and she is begging him, to help her heal her daughter. And instead of Jesus saying, yes, of course, all people are valuable, here's what Jesus says. He says, "First, let the children eat all they want," he told her, "for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." So basically, he's saying, I'm for certain people. You're not in that group. You and your daughter are dogs. And the woman has to say to them, but don't even the dogs get some scraps from the table? In other words, she's saying, please, okay, call me a dog. I'll be a dog, but can you give me a few scraps? And I guess that fed Jesus's narcissistic ego enough to where he decided that he would go ahead and heal the daughter. And when she went home, she found him healed. Isn't that completely at odds with the message of the gospel, especially John 3:16, where it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. His only begotten son didn't seem to believe that when he was alive. Now, I know what apologists will say, because I remember thinking when I was a Christian, well, Jesus was actually doing her a favor. See, she wasn't a Jew. That's not who he came for at that time. And so he was doing her a favor by healing anyone at all in her life. What a crappy thing for the Savior of the world to say. Did he not know what his mission would be? The Great Commission that he would give to his disciples? Savage, disgusting. All right, let's move on. Back to Matthew and back to Jesus' anti-family values. So this is out of Matthew 10, 34 through 36. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. This goes back to the passage in Luke, backing that up. And it might be the only prophecy or prediction that Jesus gave that actually came true, because you can just see that Christians, not only do they fight with other religions like Islam throughout the hundreds and thousands of years, they also fight amongst each other. Look at Ireland. I'm old enough to remember 1970s and 1980s Ireland, where the Protestants and Catholics, sometimes family against family, unalived each other, terrorized each other over fighting about Christianity. So that happened. And if you go further back into European history, of course, it's fraught with religious wars, not, Islam against Christianity, but also Christian against Christian. You can look at the history of Elizabeth I and her cousin, Mary, Queen Mary I, Bloody Mary, and they both killed hundreds, and I think Mary would burn them at the stake, hundreds of Christians that they thought, were blasphemous. If you want a good book on that, what's her name? Let me look here. Is it June Dunn? Yeah, Jane Dunn. She has a book called Elizabeth and Mary, Cousins, Rivals, and Queens. And it talks all about the history that led up to this bloody Christian battle between the two of them. If you buy the book through my link, I'll make a couple of cents, a couple of pennies. But if not, just get the book, because it's really good. I love reading about the history of the English monarchy. It's very interesting to me. We're going to stay in Matthew. There's another passage in Matthew that's very well known. It's Matthew 5, 28 through 30. But let me read it. And if you're a Christian, really listen to it. Don't just gloss over it. Listen to what he says. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part than your whole body to go into hell. Doesn't that go against the whole message of the New Testament, of the gospel? That we're not saved by doing things like cutting off our hands or gouging out our eyes. We're saved by believing in Jesus and asking for his forgiveness for those sins. Not that I think that looking at a big pair of tatas is a sin, or looking at a man with big broad shoulders is a sin. I don't think it's a sin. It's just human nature. It's how we're designed. It doesn't make you a sinner. And it doesn't mean that you want to grab their phone number and run off with them into the sunset. It doesn't mean any of those things. So that's barbaric. His advice is barbaric. And of course, apologists will say, he didn't really mean it. That's hyperbole. That's hyperbole. But where does Jesus say that's hyperbole? It's not a parable. He's literally saying it, gouge out your eyes, which it just goes against the whole New Testament. And how gross and savage and nasty is that? If we had any kind of cult leader saying that, we would say, oh, what a savage, horrible person. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're on to our last two, and these are the ones you've been waiting for. And I like this because I think this is a little bit different than what a lot of other atheist YouTubers have done. But first, hey, if you've stuck around this far, you must like me at least a little bit. You know that I love you. I tell you that on every video. My members especially, because they're so smart. They help me so much when they make comments, and they help me defray my costs. Atheist channels, we don't make any money. And I love my subs too. I love you so much. I've never met such a group of smart people. You make me feel stupid, but I love you. I love how you help me. So give me a like, give me a sub, and let's move on to the last two. Believe it or not, the next one comes out of Revelation. That's Revelation 19:11 through 16. Let's read about Jesus here. This is John of Patmos talking. I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse, whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. He is dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and the armies of heaven, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of the God Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh he has this name written, King of Kings and Lords of Lords. Now, this is something that's supposed to happen in the future, but this is in the canonized Bible. If you believe in the canonized Bible, you have to believe that God put it there. And so this is the nature of Christ. This is the nature of the world healer, the sacrificial lamb, the one of love. He comes with wrath, blood-soaked garments. If that's not brutal and savage, I don't know what is. But it's not the most brutal and the most savage that Jesus has ever been. Of course, he hasn't been there yet. I don't think he ever will be. But we do know that some of the other things that he has done, and they're in the Old Testament. So stick with me. Jesus was brutal, the most brutal throughout the entire Old Testament. Yeah, you heard me, the Old Testament. Because the Gospel of John explains that Jesus was with God from the very first chapter of Genesis. Yahweh is Jesus, and Jesus is Yahweh. They're as one. There's one. The Son and the Father are one. They are in tandem with each other. Have you ever read the Old Testament? Have you ever read it? If you haven't, crack it open. Or just go ahead and listen to some of the debate shows, and you'll hear most of what goes on in the Old Testament, the horrific things that happen, where not just Yahweh was brutal, but his son, Jesus, that was with him, was brutal and savage. How he did this through his people, the Hebrews. He took out his savagery and brutalism with those people. He used them as tools on earth to inflict nothing but damage and worldwide chaos in, well, their little world. They didn't seem to know about the rest of the world going on about them. So those are my most savage Jesus moments in the Bible. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.